Sunday before Thanksgiving. Since this is a Thanksgiving celebration, we are saying thank you to you for your participation in the restoration and renovation of this church, which has a very rich heritage. As you can see, there is much yet to be done. Interior work will be done next year as decisions are made and funds are raised. But today, we give thanks for a beginning, and we give thanks for your participation in that beginning. For the first phase of our work is almost completed. Now, before we start the program, I'm going to give you one very practical detail. Just in case one of you should have to use restrooms during the service, I would suggest that you can go out the back door, around, and you will find a back entrance, and there is a restroom in the back, just in case. And now, I have the pleasure of introducing the Reverend George Lockwood. It is, how can I say how it feels as a pastor of this church to be able to welcome a pastor who was here 50 years ago when this congregation was celebrating its 200th anniversary. And from all that I read about the wonderful celebration, it must have been a very exciting time. And we have asked Reverend Bachwick, whose book we have used almost like we would use the word, so to speak, only in regards to our own history and writing our playlets, our skits, whatever you want to call them, today. So Reverend George Bachwick, we'd appreciate it if you would favor us with the introduction.
Sounds like the beginning of the Masterpiece Theater. And I want to get that music because it makes a marvelous wedding march. So I feel right at home because Alistair Cook is a cut chopper. Lives out on Nassau Point. I've seen him several times and heard him cut chop. So this is Masterpiece Theater production. And it's great to be back again in this lovely old church where Helen and I started together after our wedding in 1936. And of course it was back down in South Haven in those days, and a lot of water has gone through the old grist mill and then under the highway, Carmen River, since those days. So it's wonderful to be back. See that a lot has not been changed. There have been a few changes, mainly in the moving of the church to this better location. I'm sorry I didn't meet the expectation of bringing you the bound copies, but here is the book. It's at a bindery. It's gotten that far. It's taken 2 years to get to the printers and editing and so on. So it'll be here, I hope, not before too long, and I shall read the introduction to the first chapter, which is headed "The Mother Church is Established." This is a story of a resolute group of men and women, rarely numbering more than 50, who for 3 years, short of 2 centuries, have kept alive a church because they loved it and needed it, and now for 2.5 centuries. In spite of times with many insurmountable odds. They were not rich people, for farmers, fishermen, and whalers rarely became wealthy on Long Island in colonial times. Yet the lack of money did not daunt them. The Revolutionary War impoverished them as a famine or depression could not. For through 7 long years, their farms were either uncared for or furnished provender for the British soldiers. Yet when peace was declared and their homes had been repaired and occupied, their first desire was the rebuilding of their meeting house, which tradition states had been used by the enemy troops and burned. Remarkable, too, is the influence of this small rural church, which, though isolated in what was considered a primitive section of the country, sent into the political world of that colonial day distinguished men who have been recognized and remembered as leaders in the early life of our nation. Less obvious, but more important, was the joy and hope and courage and idealism which this church inspired through the years in the southern part of Brookhaven town and in neighboring villages. Men and women sacrificed to keep it going, where they felt they could not live without it.
Winter's settling in. It's really getting cold. I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to go back and forth to church this year. With the baby this young, I worry that she stays warm, even when I bundle her up. Heaven knows my toes don't. You remember, last year I thought I'd lose one before we got back home. It's a long trip to Setauket on the North Shore.
There are more settlers now than when we came, Mary. Why, there are the Woodhulls and the Roses and the Floyds. Though he's not much for church meetings, his wife is faithful. Maybe we could have our own meeting house. I can see it in my mind now. Something simple, like the Lord would like. No fancy Church of England blindness. Why, Esmond could probably have it built next spring if the Woodhulls and the Floyds would lend a hand. Perhaps we could even have our own preacher.
Maybe someone would give us some land. Wouldn't it be wonderful to work on a knoll where everyone can see it as they go by? Maybe near the going-over where the farmers bring their grain to Carmentsville. The loggers are always hauling logs over there. If I close my eyes, I can see it now. We'd be the only church for miles around.
I think it's fine. I think, yeah, we should be putting it in. It's fine. Probably. I don't know. What do you think, William?
I'll donate the land, and this is where we'll go.
In here.
At a meeting of the inhabitants of the parish of Setauket on this 13th day of June in the year of our Lord 1774. It was voted and agreed that the Act of Parliament for blocking up the Port of Boston is unconstitutional and has a direct tendency to enslave the inhabitants of America and put an end to all property. And it is also the opinion of the meeting that if the colonies all unite and strictly adhere to a non-importation agreement from Great Britain and the West Indies and have no trade with them, we should have great reason to expect in a short time a repeal of that oppressive act. And for that purpose, we heartily desire that such an agreement may be entered into. And it is further voted and agreed that William Smith, Esquire, Colonel Nathaniel Woodhull, Colonel William Floyd, Mr. Thomas Manning, Captain Josiah Smith, Captain David Mulford, and Captain Jonathan Baker be a standing committee for this place to correspond with the Committee of Correspondence in the City of New York and others, and that they immediately communicate the above sentiments to him.
I agree with you. I agree.
Sounds pretty dangerous.
No, we would have to leave. We would have to leave. No, we can't stay. We can't stay. The British are away. Now's our chance.
My name is David Rose. I was known as Priest Rose after the custom of my day. I was called to the ministry of Mauritius, Manor of St. George, south of Town of Brookhaven, and went to our patent in December of the year of our Lord, 1765. The following year, the Middletown parish, what you now call Middle Island, was added to my call. I served as pastor, teacher, and physician, and I found for my family's needs. I joined with most of the parish in the cause of the Patriots against the Tories. For this, I and many of my friends and neighbors were forced to flee. I went to Connecticut. My brother-in-law, Nathaniel Woodhull, was killed here. My good friend, William Floyd, went to Philadelphia to serve in the Continental Congress. My wife died from the hardships of exile in Connecticut. Our lands and homes were pillaged and burned, and our little meeting house in South Haven was burned to prevent its use by the Tories as a stable and storehouse. Now I return to my ravaged parish. We are a sad lot, but we are determined to rebuild our friendships and livelihoods. We were not all of one mind back in the days before the war. Some of those I call my friends now feel compelled to leave our parish and go to Canada. But with others we are reconciled. Among our best tasks is a rebuilding of our meeting house in South Haven. It is but a temporary structure, somewhat gone away, to the south and west of the burying ground. As one of my successors, the Reverend Green, said, it was sealed up for only a short distance. No way of keeping, except by footstones, rough, unadorned, and comfortless, in great contrast to your present neat and comfortable little church. It is a difficult time, but we are free, and our religion flourishes. I remarried and continued to serve the parish until 1799.
getting late and darkness is here.
Oh, don't go. We'll all wait together, please.
Now, Dad, your man will not want your women and a bawling child to see you. Go to bed. We'll be home right off.
No lights. Tom? Tom? Tom?
Good afternoon. My name is Ezra King. When I invited to address you, I thought to deliver to you one of my sermons, which were much admired in their day, and for what I see, much needed in these days. But I was discouraged in this endeavor by your good pastor, who informs me that you would probably not last beyond the third week. I must say, the third week was usually just my introduction. Instead, your pastor asked me to tell you about the fish and Daniel Webster. Daniel was a frequent visitor to our parish, staying at Sam Commons Tavern across the road. Commons River was known for the quality of its fish. Daniel had been trying for some time to hook a huge trout which he knew was in the river below the Mills Dam. It was a fine spring day in 1823. He had set aside to the lookout and came to Sunday morning service. Knowing that Daniel was likely to be at the service and that more than usual would be there to see the famous senator, I had taken special care of my preparation. I was just warming to the subject, having just reached 9th grade, when Josiah entered and whispered in Daniel's ear that the fish were lazily swimming in the pool below the mill. But Joshua was prone to excitement, and his whisper was not very discreet, so I'm afraid he disturbed many in their meditations. My wife says they will feel that I did rise from my sleep. Daniel tiptoed out, and then Sam commented his son. Then some of the other boys managed to elude the watchful eyes of the parents and the elders. Curiosity eventually overcame others, who left, not too quietly I might add. I began to realize that I would soon be preaching to an empty meeting house. I therefore concluded the sermon, gave a benediction, and went across the street with the elders. The fish at first seemed in no mood to oblige us, and I was beginning to believe I was hasty in abridging the service. But suddenly the senator's line tightened and we saw a mighty thrashing. We all shouted advice, I confess, even myself. Daniel pulled the fish in, and when weighed, it tipped the scales at 14.5 pounds. This is all true, I assure you. We have not diverted from the truth by so much as a pinhead. All the men adjourned to Sam's Tavern, and even I had a wee bit of rum. Daniel was to return to New York City, so they packed the fish and ice for him for the journey. And I understand it was served in a feast at Delmonico's. Before he left, Philip Holmes drew an outline of it on Sam Commons' house. And later had a weather vane cut out of cherry wood. It was 1/3 larger, so as to appear the natural side when seen through the ground. Unfortunately, we had no old church spire, still being the so-called temporary meeting house, some 30 years old. Philip had been urging a new building for years, and I always suspected that the weather vane was his way of goading us to finish the work. But that is another story, which I understand others are to tell. But the weather vane did eventually grace our building. There for about half a century, it pointed the direction of the wind. Now, one summer's afternoon, during a thunderstorm, a bolt of lightning struck the steeple and knocked a wooden fish down, killing the wheel of the naked shadow against the side of the church. There in front of you is the original weather vane. Carrier and Ives also made and printed this historic event. I understand as part of your renovation project, a new weather vane has been carved and gilded and now graces the steeple. So before you all look out at me again, I thank you. May the peace of the Lord God Almighty be with you.
it was resolved that each proprietor of the meeting house in the parish of Setauket will pay $25 or upwards to defray the expenses of their building said house shall be entitled to the choice of a pew for their family forever. And those who pay $10, they should be entitled to lifetime pews. It's further determined that pew number 13. Not in great demand by any of the proprietors, shall remain for the use of the clergyman and his
Well, what pew did you get us, Joshua?
Or round towards the back, you know, where it'll be convenient in case the kids have to be fed or taken care of or anything like that.
You mean it was cheaper in the back? My best friend, Dory Floyd, she has a place right up front.
Dory Floyd owns half the property down by the bay. She can afford any pew she wants. And besides, Deborah, you're due soon. And gonna have to hire somebody to do those few little things you do around the place, like feed the chickens, and slop the hogs, and milk the cows, and do the laundry, and do the cooking. And a few of those things, you know, and it's pig slaughtering time soon.
You know what I did?
What?
I asked Mom to come for a month. Because she's the best big smoker in all the South Shore.
Your mother's coming for a month?
I am pleased to report that nearly all the pews have been sold and that the building committee realized $450.
Sorry, Smith's pew.
Lloyd's pew.
Tucker pew.
At a meeting of the trustees held in 1840, it was reported there being some satisfaction in the parish respecting the disposition of the pews. The trustees report that James Wicks, Charles Smith, Nicholas Floyd, John Smith, and William Smith have donated $75 to buy back 3.5 pews for the purpose of promoting harmony and good feeling in the parish. And that these be made free for the use of any and every person that would attend religious services in the meeting house.
I can't stand it anymore. What now? That Sarah Floyd, she wears that hat that's bigger than a bird cage, and I can't see anything around it. What are you trying to look at? And John Floyd leaned over his pew last Sunday and tried to bite me. Why Mother wanted this pew in back of the Floyds, I got no idea. Oh, I think John likes you. And Mom's always pitching me quiet. I can't even breathe without being quiet. Where'd you work up front? I'm working on a pew tree. Why don't you go sit in an open pew? Sit there? You know what kind of people sit over there. And I'd have to wake up before the crack of dawn to get a place. I'm going to ask my dad for a pew tree. Reverend Frisbee said no more. Everybody's pew tree. Reverend Frisbee doesn't like to give gifts and an iMessage to you because you're not sitting in the right spot. I'm working on the wood hole pew that's way in the back. My dad approached him for it. Edna, you went, you traitor! I saw John Floyd going to church this morning, and he has a snaky son. Shh, Edna!
My name is Frederick Van Dusen Frisbee, pastor of this congregation from 1885 to 1900. In 1889, I preached on the history of our church. I don't know what caused more friction, my sermon or my marriage to one of the parishioners. But I want to thank the support group here for being so discreet about the circumstances of my resignation, leaving so much to your good Christian imagination. I use as my text today Psalm 1, verse 1. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. Nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. For some 60 years, the issue of hereditary rights to meeting house pews has created dissatisfaction in our little church. While our ancestors thought it a sensible way of obtaining the necessary money to refund the debt incurred when a lovely little meeting house was built, it has encouraged exclusiveness among members, led to friction, and caused the kind of bargaining not at all befitting Christians. New members are joining our congregation, and the old are not dying off rapidly enough. They have to sit in the corners, while pews in the center go vacant. Some of you will not move over in your seats to allow a stranger to sit beside you, contrary to the teachings of our Master. May I venture here to express the hope that all hereditary rights to meeting house pews shall be given up. Starting just before the Civil War. By this time, there was a Presbyterian church in Bellport, as well as Southampton. There being a great distance between these two communities, I was cast for both. First, I would like to thank Mr. Frisbee for finally speaking plainly to a subject that was most troublesome during my pastorate, but which I was never able to resolve. Mr. Presby, by the way, besides speaking plainly, is remembered for his love of horses. He kept a fine team of them and loved to race them, even on Sundays, with those of his parishioners. He held services at both Bellport and Setauket on Sunday mornings, so had ample justification for speeding to arrive at the latter on time. He always drove up to the Southampton meeting house, so his friends say, with the horses in a ladder. Among my most remembered achievements was the remodeling of the meeting house. I understand that Mr. Borthwick here thought the architectural changes made during my tenure ruined some of the original charm of the meeting house. I make no apologies. The building was about some 25 years old, and we were still too close to the rigors of the colonial period to think it charming. South Country Road had been redirected to run behind the church, so we turned things around. We closed up the old doors, we moved the high old pulpit, cutting it down to its present height, and built the balcony. We cut new entrances beneath the steeple. We also redecorated the interior with furnishings and colors more befitting our Victorian age. Mr. Borthwick has several other less known kind comments about the architectural changes made during this period, but in defense, we thought ourselves an active Christian community, not as a period museum. I felt very strongly about the injustices committed against minorities. And while at Rutgers College, gave an oration on the wrongs done to American Indians. This before such concerns had much popularity. While members of this congregation had been slave owners, by 1828, slave owning was against the law in New York State. In 1835, a former slave was admitted to full membership in this congregation. During the period of my pastorate, this nation went through our second civil war, but the Revolutionary War was very much also a civil war. Even though this time we were far from the actual fighting, the war was not kind to us. Your records do not indicate much in the way of official actions, but I can tell you as a people, we were much saddened. I lost a son to the fighting. Others in the community lost husbands, sons, and fathers. Why can't we live peaceably together?
For those of you who do not recognize me, my name is William Floyd, a landowner and a farmer of this community, a member and trustee of this church, and most recently, brigadier of the regular troops in the service of George Washington during the War for the Independence from the British Crown. No, I think not the pulpit, George. You know I never liked the pulpit. You know, little did I realize as I think back about the implications of the things that we did here some 200, 250 years ago. I never thought of being a patriot. I was more a realist than a patriot. My mind was not so much on being an historic figure as it was acting out what we believed in this little community. That our faith was to be lived in our time. It was not something simply housed in a building, but it was to be lived. And we did believe that we had a God-given right to make our own decisions, a God-given right to be treated justly, a God-given right to make those decisions for our own lives that we wanted to make. All these things, in a way, are the very foundation of the Christian faith that we, through the grace of God, were given. But with that action in Philadelphia, when I was one of those who signed the Declaration of Independence, with that action, of course, all hell broke loose. You know that. And you've seen how that bigger picture affected this little community back here beside the river. The toll the war took on our lives. I myself, branded an outlaw, had my estate ravaged. Along with Judge Smith, the British cut 4,000 cords of wood from our property. It was left barren. There was nothing when we came home. I, too, lost my wife, my first wife, due to the rigors of her exile in Connecticut. We suffered. We died for principle. But that is what this little church has always been home to, hasn't it? A principled people. A people who applied the faith that they held to their very lives. They tried to live what they believed in. They had the courage to live that life, even when the road ahead was unmarked, unpaved. They had that confidence. They never feared to be a minority, as long as their minority opinion held with the ordinances and the tenets of the faith that they had been brought up and professed belief in. The wars, 2.5 centuries of wars. You would think in this quiet little countryside, they might have been isolated from some of that, insulated away from it, but they weren't, you know that. The wars of the last 250 years seem to hang like gaudy beads on the necklace of this church's history, and always a people wanted only peace. We, who were called patriots by some, rebels by others, we wanted only peace. But we were forced to buy it at a high and costly price. 100 years later, in Reverend Cooper's time, they wanted only peace. But they fought a great civil war to get that peace. And in the process, Reverend Cooper lost a son, and the Presbyterian Church was divided into North and South because both could theologically prove that their position was right. But what of more recent times? You have seen enacted here some of what happened in the 18th and the 19th centuries. But events of this century have already cast themselves into the concrete of the historical time of this church. They are as much a part of the South Haven Meeting House as what we showed you as the more glorious past. And always there has been that search for God's great peace. In 1917, the Doughboys from Camp Upton visited this church before they left to go to Europe to fight for peace. In the 1940s, the GIs from Camp Upton visited this church before they went to Europe, to the Pacific Front, again, to look for peace. Gradually, along with the rest of the world, maybe just a little sooner because of its history and its heritage, this church begun to understand that peace is not simply the absence of conflict. Peace is the active working out, pursuit of ways to keep the conflict from beginning to start with. So you've worked for that. You tried to be a catalyst in the community in the problems of the school integration in the 60s. Reverend Kellogg's symbolic exorcism of the cannons of war at the memorial during the Vietnam War in in the early 70s. Reverend Long, who left this parish in 1986 to go to Nicaragua to be a chaplain to the people who were witnessing for peace to end the war there. Reverend Baum's central focus now on those who are disenfranchised, looking for internal peace. All in the name of peace. The commitment of all those who make up this congregation to accept each individual's distinct personhood, striving to be an inclusive community of Christians. You have taken good care of that with which you have been entrusted. You are taking pains to honor and revere the building. 5 generations have used this building. That's important, for it boasts much history. But it stands as something far greater than a unique assembly of wood and glass and plaster. It stands as something far more of the spirit than the spire, far more of the conscience than the cornice. It is best summed up, I think, in the last paragraph of Reverend Borthwick's little work, when he says this, 1938. It is a new and strange day which the old meeting house across from the going over at Commons River is witnessing. Its quiet is disturbed by the steady stream of cars that file past it every day, but it stands there in all its dignity and beauty. A symbol of permanence, a landmark for 2 centuries, declaring to a world which is in such a hurry that within can be found those truths which never die and those things which really matter, which apply to the needs of every generation, no matter how modern, and for the acquiring of which people have gathered there for 200 years, and will continue to assemble within those walls so long as they shall stand. This is the history of the South Haven Church, the story of those apparent facts about an institution as substantial and inspiring as its meeting house, which through the changing years has provided stability and vision to the lives of those who worship it. Within the hearts of the members themselves is the story which no one can write. The story of what this church has done for them and means to them. Nearly 50 years have passed since you wrote those words, Jordan. They're still essentially and emphatically true. Not much of substance has changed in the physical world that surrounds us, but the world in which this church stands is vastly new. As you shore up these walls for the future, ideological walls are falling all over the world. May this congregation and this little church meet the challenge ahead. Meet as you met those of your past. May your future not be measured by the peaceful periods between your wars. May a lasting peace be your objective and your means. Live by it, work for it, seek it out, grasp it. And may the memories of the more contemporary leaders, such as Elizabeth Floyd, who helped to found the South Country Peace Group, begin to be more important in your history than the William Floyds who helped to raise an army. I thank you.
we have really enjoyed doing this. It's given us an opportunity to really look backwards, to assess our present, and to look at our future. And now we would like to give some expressions of appreciation to the community and to those who have supported us. And first of all, we would like to say thank you to the New York Landmarks Conservancy, who is giving us a $7,000 grant towards the refurbishing of the exterior of our building. And so we would like to give personal thanks to Ed Malowski, Director of the Religious Properties Program, and also to Peter Papras, who is the fundraiser for the Conservancy. Thank you.
Reverend Bum, thank you very much, and the elders and the members of the congregation and the community, thank you very much for inviting me and Peter to come here and join you today in this celebration. But also let me thank you, the congregation, for your commitment to this building. I'm not from New York, from Long Island. I'm not originally from New York City. I don't know how important it is. It's very important when I go to the community and I see buildings like this that still remain, that have been preserved, that are maintained. I am not the only person in the United States who feels this way. I think there are many people who are enriched by the commitment that people have to their communities, to their buildings, to their churches, to their synagogues, and to these buildings because they're such symbols of the community within. In this case, I think the commitment to this building, to the community around, is very evident by the little skits that you gave here, and I think in the number of people that have shown up today. In the past 10 years, the Landmarks Conservancy has been very active in working with religious institutions throughout the state of New York and finding ways, creative ways to help with the restoration and preservation of historic religious properties. Each institution is different. Each one has a different approach. When we came here this past June, I believe, to review your application, Neil Vogel from our technical staff came. He was very impressed with the commitment that such a small congregation could have to this undertaking. Our advisory committee was equally impressed and had no trouble at all recommending a $7,000 grant to help you and to become a partner with you in this endeavor. So, on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the New York Landmarks Conservancy, I ask you, Reverend Gomez, to accept this check for $7,000 to be applied for the exterior restoration of this church.
We don't want anything to seem strange.
And we have letters saying street autograph.
Well, thank you. Shall I read this? Greetings. We, the pastor and elders of Old Setauket Presbyterian Church, express our gratitude to the New York Landmarks Conservancy for its generous support of our restoration project. Your donation will play an essential part not only in repairing a beautiful and historic building, but in sustaining an active Christian ministry. It is especially appropriate that we are able, with your help, to complete this restoration on the eve of the congregation's 250th anniversary. With a restored structure, we hope to continue for many generations more over Mr. Christ that has enriched this community since 1740. Thank you.
Good neighbors are important. And when I first arrived here, I knew that there were good neighbors across the road. I had the good fortune of attending seminary with the present pastor's wife. And so John Henry and I already had links one to the other and links to the two churches. And since then, build together with a spirit of ecumenicism. I must say that the Episcopal Church has been very generous to us, and they have made a very generous donation to us to help us to be able to continue to be their neighbors. And so I would ask Reverend John Henry, Vicar of the St. James Episcopal Church, to come forward. We also have a letter of appreciation for that church.
I did a lot of talking this morning, so I'll let y'all off easy. Jeannie and my wife Karen were both at the seminary of Union in New York City, and when we heard that Jeannie was coming here, we decided we would get together. When? Memorial Day? Yeah, Memorial Day this year. And so we are overjoyed that she is here sharing her ministry with you, and that we know each other. Our Bishops Committee, which is, I guess, the counterpart of your, whatever your local governing board is called, Presbyterian, sent Jeannie a Bible in recognition of the beginning of her ministry on the occasion of her ordination here. I was honored to be attending at that. When the call went out for your restoration fund, our people came forward and said, we would like to send some money. So over the course of 3 years, we have pledged the sum of $1,500 to you for the continued refurbishing of your sanctuary. As I've often said to Jeannie, we're not the competition, we're in this together. Right?
And now, slightly more personal gift in some ways. Reverend Blockwick, we would like very much to make a presentation to you. We have so enjoyed working with your history. It has enlightened us, and we also are just so appreciative of the fact that you could be with us today. So I hope you accept this gift of appreciation.
From a fellow Union alumni.
Yes.
And the Henry Sloan Conference preached for this pulpit for my his name is President of Union. Thank you very much. Used to collect antiques when we were here because it was during the Depression and we couldn't afford anything but antiques, and they were cheap second-hand furniture. Original very nice. So thank you very much.
Mr. Bianchi, or is any of Mr. Bianchi's family present by any chance? If not, I'm sure we will send this on. Deborah Mayo. Debbie? This is another example of ecumenicism. Debbie is on loan from St. James Episcopal Church. Debbie has been our coach, has loaned her talent to us, helping us to put together our skit and our play.
Follow that so much.
And Debbie has a very heavy schedule, and we are very thankful, Debbie, and we would like very much for you also to have a copy of one of the archives books. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to do this. Is Ellen Williams here? Ellen, would you come forward, please? Ellen is the one who wrote our proposal to the Sacred Landmark Society, and time, we'd like to kind of recognize those members of the congregation who have been working on restoration and renovation. As we have mentioned, the work is not finished yet, but I would ask that Ann and Dick Griswold would please stand for our recognition, because Dick is already standing over there. They have worked very, very hard as chairpeople. Then I would ask that any other members would please rise of the Restoration and Renovation Committee. Are there other members of the Restoration and Renovation Committee present? We also want to recognize the people who are doing the work. They have been most generous to us. They have worked very hard. They have taken great pride in the work that they are doing on our church. And we want to recognize that because they will hold a very special part in our hearts too. And so as I call the name of your business, so to speak, would you please rise? Larry Capasso, for whom you can see outside, has been working on the stripping down of the church and then has put the stain on it, has been patient, has been telling us all the little details that we sometimes don't know, work that we need to have done. And Larry, we thank you. Doug is doing the cabinet making work. Before long, we're going to have a brand new front door, and we have new louvers in the process. And Doug has been doing that for us. Eddie Gibbons, who has been doing the general carpentry work. Eddie, thank you. Who have been looking at our fish weather vane, we would introduce Rosemary Barrett, who has just finished building our fish for us. Following prayer and benediction, we would ask that you would join us for refreshments so we might have an opportunity to get to know each other if we do not already do so. Let us pray. Oh God, we ask your continuing blessing on this building, crafted by skill and sacrifice. We thank you for great and small missions which have been accomplished through this, your church, by faith and prayer. We add our bricks and mortar, our timber and paper, and our training and work to the heritage. May they rebuild this church of worship. Most gracious God, we pray that the work of this church may be enlarged, enriched, and strengthened as it seeks to show justice and mercy in our world of need. And now, bless all who are gathered here, and may the God of peace equip you with everything that is good, that you may authenticate the past and the present, as you too move into the future. Amen.